This week, the Pope makes changes to Holy Week rituals. He gets a historic invitation, and a short trip down the street has big impact. Hello and welcome to another edition of Vatican Connections. Well, Lent is just a couple weeks away, but Pope Francis is already thinking about Holy Week. This Thursday, he made significant changes to the ritual of the washing of the feet that takes place during the Holy Thursday Mass. In a letter to Cardinal Robert Sarah, the head of the Congregation for Divine Worship, Pope Francis said that when pastors need to pick the 12 people to take part in the washing of the feet, they should choose from among the entire people of God. Until now, the rubric said that men and boys only should be chosen. After visiting Rome's Synagogue, Pope Francis has been invited to visit the One Mosque in Rome. Now, a delegation representing Italy's Islamic community met with the Pope this week to formally extend an invitation. While Italian media reported that the visit could take place January 27th, while the Emir of Qatar is in Italy, members of the delegation told reporters that the Pope will decide when to visit, though they do hope that it will happen at some point during the Year for Mercy. The delegation that met with the Pope included the ambassadors of Morocco, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, as well as the President and Secretary General of Rome's Islamic Center. And we'll have more on the Pope's visit to Rome's Synagogue coming up shortly. On a different note, a baby was born on the sidewalk under Bernini's colonnade by St. Peter's Square this week. There is a substantial homeless community that lives in the Vatican neighborhood, and at night, many homeless men and women actually set up makeshift shelters under the colonnade of the Vatican buildings that are just next to St. Peter's Square. And among them was a 36-year-old Romanian woman who was pregnant. Now, early Thursday morning, around 2 a.m., she started having contractions one after the other, all of a sudden. A homeless companion flagged down a police vehicle that was on patrol, and the two police officers called for an ambulance and then jumped into action, helping to deliver the baby. Now, it only took 7 minutes for the ambulance to appear, but by then, little Irena had already arrived, and she was wrapped in standard issue police jackets. Mother and baby were taken to the Santo Spirito Hospital just around the corner and are doing well. The papal almoner actually went to visit them on Thursday, and he offered the mother a place to live for 1 year at a home for unwed mothers that's run by the Missionaries of Charity. Italian media report that the papal almoner actually knew about the woman and tried to help her before, but she always refused, though she was able to make use of the showers that are at St. Peter's Square. So this time, though, things look just a little bit different. Business and political leaders are gathered in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum this week. Pope Francis sent a message to the participants, and in that letter to the president of the forum, he calls on participants to remember the poor. Now, he said the fourth industrial revolution makes drastic job loss seem inevitable, but the lack of employment makes poverty and inequality a bigger and bigger problem. The fourth industrial revolution refers to the digitalization of our industries. Now, drawing on a speech he gave in the Central African Republic, he said those who have the means to enjoy a decent life can't just sit back and enjoy it. They have to help those less well off attain dignified living conditions. He said we must never let ourselves be deadened by a culture of prosperity to the point that we forget how to have compassion for the poor. And that does not mean just weeping for other people's pain, but opening our eyes to recognize that our actions are a cause of injustice and inequality. Now, when we recognize this, we become more fully human. The Pope called on the leaders at the forum to use this opportunity for dialogue to make all their business endeavors serve society. And just before the Davos meeting, actually, the Vatican hosted its own global economic meeting along with the Global Foundation. This brought together several of the people getting ready to go to Davos. Cardinal George Pell addressed the participants at that roundtable and announced that the Vatican has committed to eliminating slavery from its supply chains. He also praised the 400 companies who make up Consumer Goods Forum for their commitment to do the same. Now, the Holy See also weighed in on global security issues this week at the UN Security Council meeting. The Holy See's permanent observer to the UN, Bernardito Auza, addressed that council on Tuesday, calling for protections of civilians in war zones and reminding the council about the disastrous effects of war on civilians, including starvation and destruction of hospitals and schools. Archbishop Auza said the international community has to do everything in its power to stop the atrocities of war and war crimes, including the justified use of force. Now, the Security Council and its member states, he said, have the tools to protect civilians and bring the perpetrators of war crimes to justice, but they have to have the will to use those tools. He said the Pope explicitly thanks Lebanon and Jordan, as well as the frontline countries of Italy, Greece, and Turkey, for all their efforts and commitments to save lives and ease the suffering. These countries need the help of the entire international community to face the challenges posed by massive movements of refugees and migrants. A former Vatican official has been acquitted of charges of attempting to smuggle 20 million euros into Italy from Switzerland on a private plane, bypassing customs and tax controls. An Italian court cleared Monsignor Nunzio Scarano of charges of corruption and smuggling, but found him guilty of a lesser charge of making false accusations. So it seems Monsignor Scarano had made a deal with a former Italian Secret Service agent, and he was supposed to pay this former agent 40,000 euros for the help in smuggling money. He paid him 20,000 up front, and then he reported the money stolen. So he is still awaiting trial in Salerno for trying to use the Vatican Bank to launder millions of euros. And finally, if you followed the Pope's visit to Cuba and the United States last fall, you know that the vehicle used to drive the Pope to his various visits was a dark gray Fiat 500L. 2 of these cars were actually donated by Chrysler for the Pope's visit, and they are in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. So now the Archdiocese of Philadelphia is auctioning off one of the Fiats to raise money for Philadelphia Catholic charities, education projects at their Catholic schools, a women's rehabilitation home, and homes for low-income Latino families. The auction will happen at the Philadelphia Auto Show. The week began with Pope Francis visiting Rome's synagogue. Now, just before the visit, Catholic News Service spoke to Rome's chief rabbi about the significance of the visit and the history of Rome's Jewish community. Let's take a look.
We are here before the Christian arrived, and the Christians who arrived here were Jews themselves. So this place has an enormous symbolic meaning because of the history, because the persecution we suffered, persecution by the church itself we suffered, and this huge building of the synagogue was built after the Jews got the freedom. They went out of the ghetto. It was built on the ruins of the ghetto.
Pope Francis will visit Rome's Jewish community and the city's main synagogue January 17th. Rabbi DeSegni told Catholic News Service the visit is an important continuation of the tradition of papal visits begun by St. John Paul II.
This visit is important because it gives two important signals. The first signal is the continuity. It means that the route opened by John Paul II and followed by Benedict XVI is now going forward, is not stopped, there is no way back. This is the first important sign. The second is the urgency of the moment. We are in a very dramatic moment in the history of the world and the Europe in particular. There is violence inspired and sustained by distorted visions of religion. And what we want to demonstrate is that we can keep our differences, building a better world and not destroying the world. I met this Pope sometimes, so I have the opportunity to discuss with him just face to face. And some other times I had telephone conversations, and there is always an open line in a case of necessity. Talking about mercy could be a controversial issue, because in the past times the Catholic and Christian teaching stressed the difference between the God of mercy and the God of justice. This Pope is going in a different situation, being much more honest and linked to the basic biblical tradition, which speaks about a God of justice and mercy together. So it is important that in his proclamation of the special year of mercy, he stressed the Jewish theological root of mercy. This Pope is a Pope of surprises, so we are waiting for his surprises.
Now, the visit went beautifully, with the Pope meeting members of the synagogue's community, remembering victims of past attacks on the community, and of course the survivors of the Holocaust. Now, the Pope, the chief rabbi, and the president of Rome's Jewish community all spoke about a new era in Catholic-Jewish relations that began with the Vatican II Declaration Nostra Aetate. CNS has more on the visit.
Conflitti, guerre, violenze ed ingiustizie aprono ferite profonde nell'umanità e ci chiamano a rafforzare l'impegno per la pace e la giustizia. La violenza dell'uomo sull'uomo è in contraddizione con ogni religione degna di questo nome. E in particolare con le tre grandi religioni monoteistiche. La vita è sacra, quale dono di Dio. Il quinto comandamento del Decalogo dice: non uccidere. Dio è il Dio della vita e vuole sempre promuoverla e difenderla. E noi, creati a sua immagine e somiglianza, siamo tenuti a fare lo stesso. Ogni essere umano, in quanto creatura di Dio, è nostro fratello, indipendentemente dalla sua origine o dalla sua appartenenza religiosa. Il popolo ebraico nella sua storia ha dovuto sperimentare la violenza e la persecuzione fino allo sterminio degli ebrei europei durante la Shoah. La Shoah ci insegna che occorre sempre massima vigilanza per poter intervenire tempestivamente in difesa della dignità umana e della pace. Vorrei esprimere la mia vicinanza ad ogni testimone della Shoah ancora vivente e rivolgo il mio saluto particolare a coloro, a voi, che siete qui presenti.
This week's phrase is apostolic nuncio. The word nuncio refers to an archbishop who acts as an ambassador for the Holy See. The word itself comes from the Latin word nuncius, which means messenger. By the Church's definition of the role, a nuncio's office has to be limited to a specific location. His office is permanent, and his job encompasses both diplomatic and ecclesiastical functions. Nunciatura refers to the building where the nuncio lives and works.
Our closeness and spiritual fraternity find in the Holy Bible their most stable and lasting foundation, which constantly reminds us of our common roots, our history, and the rich spiritual patrimony that we share. This is what Benedict XVI said during his visit to the Great Synagogue of Rome on Sunday, January 17th. Speaking of the Second Vatican Council, Benedict XVI noted how it has given a strong impetus to our irrevocable commitment to pursue the path of dialogue, fraternity, and friendship. The singular and deeply disturbing drama of the Shoah, the pontiff said, represents the most extreme point on the path of hatred that begins when man forgets his creator and places himself at the center of the universe. The Pope then recalled the deportation of Roman Jews. Unfortunately, many remained indifferent, but many, including Italian Catholics, sustained by their faith and by Christian teaching, reacted with courage, often at risk of their lives, opening their arms to assist the Jewish fugitives who were being hunted down and earning perennial gratitude. The Apostolic See itself provided assistance.
On the second day of his trip to Turkey, Pope Francis traveled from Ankara to Istanbul, where he was welcomed by the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I and the governor of the city. His first stop in Istanbul was at the Sultan Ahmet Mosque, known as the Blue Mosque. As the Pope crossed the Great Porch and entered the mosque, he was greeted by the Grand Mufti. After a short tour, Pope Francis paused for a moment of prayer, as Benedict XVI did in 2006. At the end of his visit, conversing with his hosts, the Pope said twice, "We must worship God," adding, "We must not only praise and glorify Him, but we must also worship Him." Pope Francis then proceeded to Hagia Sophia, a Christian basilica dedicated to the divine wisdom, which was built by the Emperor Constantine, destroyed several times by fire, and rebuilt in 532 by Justinian. After Constantinople was conquered by Muslim armies in 1453, the Sultan Mehmed II transformed Hagia Sophia into a mosque. In 1935, the founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, ordered the building to be turned into a museum. At the end of his visit, Pope Francis inscribed two thoughts in the Golden Book. The first, in Greek, reads, "Holy Wisdom of God." The second, in Latin, is taken from Psalm 83. "How dear are your tabernacles, O Lord."
Let's take a look now at what else Pope Francis did this week. So on Monday, the Pope had a series of meetings, including an audience with a delegation from the Lutheran Church of Finland. They were in Rome on their annual pilgrimage for the Feast of St. Henrik, who is commemorated by both the Catholic and Lutheran churches in Finland. Addressing the delegation, Pope Francis said the dialogue between the Catholic and Lutheran churches is making progress towards a shared understanding on the sacramental level of church, Eucharist, and ministry. And he said that differences that remain should not be a source of discouragement, but an inspiration to keep moving forward. The Pope also said he appreciated the shared commitment to the care of creation on behalf of the Lutheran Church. It is, of course, the week of prayer for Christian unity. Now, that same day, Pope Francis also met with Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund. She was in Rome attending a two-day roundtable meeting organized by the Global Foundation. The roundtable was focused on rejecting the globalization of indifference and mobilizing for a more inclusive and sustainable global economy. It's the second time that she has met the Pope. Tuesday was a much-deserved day off, but Wednesday was the general audience. CNS has more.
Quando noi cristiani diciamo di condividere un solo battesimo, affermiamo che tutti noi, cattolici, protestanti e ortodossi, condividiamo l'esperienza di essere chiamati dalle tenebre impietose e alienanti all'incontro con Dio vivente, pieno di misericordia. La condivisione di questa grazia crea un legame indissolubile tra noi cristiani, così che in virtù del battesimo possiamo considerarci tutti realmente fratelli. Questo significa che abbiamo una missione comune, che è quella di trasmettere la misericordia ricevuta agli altri, partendo dai più poveri e abbandonati.
Also on Wednesday, the Pope met with a delegation from Italy's Islamic community who extended a formal invitation to visit Rome's mosque. After the general audience, Pope Francis met with bishops from Sudan and South Sudan in Rome, taking part in a meeting hosted by the Pontifical Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. And on Thursday, he accepted the credentials of the new ambassador from Burkina Faso and was presented with the lambs whose wool will make the pallia for metropolitan bishops. There were just a couple of resignations and nominations this week. Let's take a look. The administration of the Patrimony of the Holy See has a new undersecretary. The Pope appointed Monsignor Giuseppe Russo. He is a priest from the Diocese of Taranto. Now, this seems to be part of a slow renewal process going on at that office. Remember, this is the office that's being investigated by Italian authorities for money laundering, insider trading, and market manipulation. So personnel are slowly being replaced. And Pope Francis created an apostolic exarchate for Maronite Catholics in Colombia. He also named the first exarch, or bishop, Father Fadi Abu Shabel. Now, he has been serving as a university chaplain in Colombia. Well, that's all for this edition of Vatican Connections. Join us again next week for more from the Vatican and also from the International Eucharistic Congress in the Philippines. Until then, of course, you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook or check our blog for regular updates and watch on demand on Roku TV. From everyone here, thanks for watching. See you next time.